Welcome back, Focus learners. Let's just dive right into this comprehensive explainer where we are going to break down the complex rules of Philippine special contracts into crystal clear frameworks. If you're navigating the intricacies of legal agreements, whether that's for your exams or your actual professional practice, you know that the details absolutely make or break the deal. So today, we're taking those dense, heavy legal rules and transforming them into an accessible, highly practical masterclass.
Here's our super quick roadmap for today. We're going to master contracts of sale, hit installments and special rules, dive into lease rights and duties, navigate the law of agency, break down loans and deposits, and wrap the whole thing up with guarantee and mortgages. Let's get to it. Section 1. Contracts of Sale, Mastering the Basics.
Okay, right off the bat, you absolutely have to separate an absolute sale from a conditional contract to sell. It's a distinction that literally decides the outcome of so many legal disputes. Think of it like this. In a contract of sale, title passes to the buyer the exact moment the item is delivered. If the buyer doesn't end up paying, that non-payment acts as a resolutory condition, meaning it resolves or cancels the existing contract. But in a contract to sell, the seller purposely holds onto the ownership. The title doesn't pass until the payment is made in full. That full payment is a positive, suspensive condition. The transfer of ownership is literally suspended in midair until the cash is actually in the seller's hand.
Now, what if you want to lock in a property, but you're not ready to buy it right this second? Well, you need an option contract. But beware, without a separate consideration, it's just an offer, and the seller can withdraw it at any moment. Option money is totally distinct from your actual purchase price. It's literally the price you're paying just for the privilege of buying time to decide. If you don't back up your promise with that distinct consideration, the seller can legally just walk right away before you accept.
On the flip side, we have earnest money. Unlike option money, which just buys you time, earnest money actually proves the deal is done, and it forms part of the final purchase price. The second you hand over earnest money, the contract of sale is legally perfected under the law. At that point, you aren't just thinking about buying, you have legally committed to the transaction. Let's test this out practically. Imagine this. Before the ink even dries on the contract, or before the keys are handed over, a massive fire destroys the property. Who takes the financial hit? Well, the burden of risk hinges entirely on the timeline of perfection and delivery. The law relies on an old Latin maxim, ris perit domino. The thing perishes with the owner. So if the item is totally destroyed at the exact time of perfection, the contract is dead. The loss falls completely on the seller. But the moment after delivery happens, when the buyer actually has control and possession, that heavy burden of loss shifts completely over to them. Here is a classic law school scenario that happens in real life all the time. What if a shady seller sells the exact same piece of land to two completely different people? The law uses a very strict hierarchy to figure out who the true owner is. For movable property, like, say, a Rolex watch, it's pretty simple. Whoever takes physical possession first in good faith wins. But for real estate, immovable property, the law strictly favors the very first person to register it with the Registry of Property in good faith. If neither party registered it, the tiebreaker goes to the first possessor. And if that doesn't solve it, it finally goes to whoever holds the oldest title in good faith. Let's move on to Section 2, Installments and Special Statutory Rules. For movable property bought on installment, like a car, the recto law kicks in, and it gives sellers three strictly alternative remedies. The key word there is alternative, meaning if you choose to foreclose on the chattel mortgage, you absolutely cannot chase the buyer for any remaining balance. Let me repeat that because it's huge. They are alternative and exclusive. If a buyer defaults on 2 or more installments and you decide to foreclose, any side agreement you made trying to force the buyer to pay the rest of the unpaid balance, totally legally void. Now, when we're talking about buying residential real estate on installment, the Maceda law is what protects the buyer. Hitting a critical 2-year payment threshold magically unlocks some immense legal protections, including cash surrender values. If a buyer has paid for at least 2 years, they get a grace period of 1 month for every single year they've paid. Plus, they are entitled to a refund of 50% of their total payments if the contract ends up being canceled. And to validly cancel, the seller can't just send a text. They must execute a notarial act of rescission and pay that exact cash surrender value in full. If they fail to do both, the cancellation is completely void. You know, sometimes a quote-unquote sale is really just a loan in disguise. If someone supposedly sells their land, but they just stay living in the house, or the sale price is suspiciously low, or they are the ones still paying the property taxes, the law is going to look right past the paperwork. If you spot even one of these badges,
The law presumes it's actually an equitable mortgage meant to secure a debt. This stops aggressive creditors from unfairly stripping vulnerable debtors of their property while pretending it was an absolute sale. All right, Section 3, Lease Rights and Duties. Let's look at the obligations. This right here highlights a major trap for tenants. You can freely sublease your apartment unless your specific contract explicitly says no. But you can never, ever assign your lease to someone else without getting a crystal clear yes from the landlord. In a sublease, you're still the primary tenant. You're still on the hook. But in an assignment, you're completely stepping out of the picture and handing your entire legal relationship over to someone else. And that always requires express consent. Section 4. The law of agency. Let's navigate these rules. While the vast majority of agency agreements can just be oral, do not miss this absolute deal breaker. If an agent sells a piece of land for you, their authority to do so must be in writing. If it's not, that sale is legally dead on arrival. Honestly, it doesn't even matter if you gave them verbal permission in front of 20 witnesses. If the authority to sell that land isn't on paper, the entire transaction is totally void. Need an easy way to remember how an agency relationship ends? Just memorize the acronym EDWARD, E-D-W-A-R-D. It's the end of your agency. Because agency is a relationship built entirely on high personal trust, if either party dies, goes insolvent, or simply withdraws or revokes the power, the agency is immediately extinguished. Lock that Edward mnemonic into your brain for your exams. Moving into Section 5, Loans and Deposits, we're getting into credit transactions now. There is a massive, fundamental legal distinction between borrowing your friend's car, which is known as comodatum, versus borrowing money from a bank, which is mutuum. In comodatum, it's essentially a free favor, right? But the exact same non-consumable item must be returned to the owner. Ownership never transfers to you. But in a simple loan or mutuum, you receive money or consumable goods and you actually become the owner of those things. Your only obligation is to return the same amount of the same kind and quality, and usually you're paying interest on it too. And finally, Section 6, Guarantee and Mortgages. Let's explain how these securities work. If a friend ever asks you to back their debt, you better pray you are signing as a guarantor and not a surety. A guarantor only pays up if the principal debtor truly cannot. As a guarantor, you have what's called the benefit of exclusion, meaning you can legally force the creditor to exhaust all of the debtor's properties first before they come to you. A surety, however, that's solidary liability. The creditor can completely bypass the debtor and come straight for your assets from day one. No benefit of exclusion whatsoever. Time is quite literally money when it comes to property redemption. You absolutely must keep these specific windows perfectly straight if you want to get your property back. For legal redemption, like if co-owners are buying back a share, you only have a tiny window of 30 days from written notice. For an extrajudicial real estate mortgage foreclosure, you generally get 1 year from the registration of the sale. And for conventional redemption, where a seller specifically reserves the right to buy back their property, it defaults to 4 years if unstated, but legally it can never exceed 10 years by agreement. Let's talk about the modern Personal Property Security Act, or PPSA, which replaced the old chattel mortgage law. Today, securing a debt with movable property requires perfection to legally protect the creditor against any third parties. To make sure the whole world knows you have a valid claim on a movable asset, you have to do one of 3 things: file a notice in the centralized electronic registry, take actual physical possession of the collateral, or if we're talking about investment or bank accounts, you establish formal legal control. We have unpacked some serious frameworks today that govern property, promises, and protections. But the real question is, how are you going to use these exact tools to bulletproof your next major transaction? Whether you're advising a client, grinding for the bar exam, or just buying your first property, the difference between an ironclad right and a void contract literally comes down to these specific details. So, which of these special contract frameworks are you going to apply to your own life first? Keep learning, stay focused, and I'll catch you in the next explainer.